Hi there, I wanted to talk to you today, it's Rob speaking. I want to talk to you today about a very special triangle. The triangle I want to talk about today is obviously related to management and leadership. And the triangle consists of three things. It's the task, the individual, and the team. Obviously, all of these things are interrelated, and of course, one part can't operate without the other two parts. And we'll get to that during the discussion. But let's start with the task. What needs to be done so that a task can be clear, so that people know what they're doing, and so that everyone can actually get on with the job. Well, for any task, let's take the task of, for example, let's take the task of building a house, for example. Well, for that task to even begin, you're going to have what we call the scope of the task. There has to be, first of all, there will have to be a vision of what you want the house to look like. Is the house, is it going to be a house with a swimming pool and a large garden area? Is it going to be just basically a bungalow, so only one floor? It's going to have two floors. It's going to have three floors. And then when we get more into the vision of the house, is it going to be something that's going to be ultra modern? Is it something that you want to look more rustic in nature? Is it something that you want to build with the bricks? Do you want it to be covered? Do you want the stone on the outside to be apparent so that it gives an old look to the house? So there's hundreds of things to consider, even when we're talking about the vision of what we want the house to eventually look like. And then, of course, once we have a vision of what we want our house to look like, and if you really then have to start talking about the scope in more detail, because after all, you can have a vision of something and say, yes, I'd like a bungalow with a swimming pool and a big garden. Well, if you give that to a building company as a description or an architect, you're not going to get very far, because you really need to get the scope right. Now, I've taken the example of a house because I think it's a good analogy. But remember, when I'm talking about this task and defining tasks and so forth, we're talking about any task. So it could be a task of any description, not necessarily a project as big as building a house. So once you've got the vision of what you want your house to eventually look like, sort of, then you need to get into more scope. So the scope's more detail. So the scope of your house. Let's say you've decided that you want your house to be a three-story house with great views, and you want a 1,400 meter squared garden. You want to have some trees planted in this garden. You want to have grass. You want to have a gravel driveway. So already you can see that once you even start describing the external part of the house, then the landscapers are going to have an easier job because they're going to understand more, and obviously they'll have to draw up some detailed plans based on what you're saying, so that you can verify those plans and say, yeah, indeed that's where the driveway should be. Let's say we're putting in a swimming pool too. The swimming pool should be in this area. You have to define where things are going to go too. So the scope, and then of course you're only talking about the outside, and of course there's a lot more to talk about when you're talking about the outside. It could be that you want some outside lighting, automatic lighting to go on. Then you're going to have to dig tunnels in the earth to ensure you can pass cabling for that purpose. You're going to have to make sure that there's drainage, adequate drainage on the terrain. So if you've got a slope, for example, that you have adequate drainage so that your house doesn't get flooded, for example. That's very important. So all these things have to be defined in the scope. Then you get to the house itself, and then you really get into scope. I mean, then you really are talking, okay, so we want a lot of light in the house. So what kind of windows does that mean we're going to have to put in? Well, it means we're going to have to put in bay windows so we get lots of light into the house, especially on the first floor. We want 3 floors in the house. We want the maximum amount of light. We're going to have some attic rooms on the 3rd floor, so if we want the maximum amount of light, perhaps we have to put some Velux windows and windows in front to maximize the light, whether it's north or south facing. So that would be something to look at. Then the scope, obviously, then it's the number of things. Well, the number of things is quite simple, really, in this example, isn't it? It's the number of rooms that you would like in the house. So do you want a big kitchen, a small kitchen, an open kitchen, a countryside-looking style of kitchen, a modern kitchen? How big is the kitchen going to be? What types of equipment do you want in your kitchen? Do you want an open plan kitchen where you have a central island where you can walk around it and everything's around that, the cooking area and so forth? Exactly what kind of equipment are you going to put in this kitchen? So, you know, your scope has to be quite detailed for the kitchen. Yeah. After all, if you're in a kitchen and you forget to put a fridge there or a cooker, then you're not going to be doing very well. Yeah. Or today, if you forget the microwave, then you're going to still be in trouble. Yeah. Okay, so really the scope has to be detailed, and then of course how many rooms, how many bedrooms. Yeah, this will depend on the number of people that are meant to actually eventually be inhabitants within this house, of course. And it's going to be very important to get that right, isn't it? I mean, you know, the number of rooms that you need, the number of bedrooms that you need, so everyone's got a place to sleep. So you know, so you got a 3-story house. Let's say you decided you're 4 or 5 bedrooms, so a very big house this. And then you want to have a living room, you want to have a games room, we've already mentioned the kitchen, do we have a garage, do we have a single garage, or how many car owners are there in the house? Do we need a double garage, a single garage? Do we need extra parking outside, you know, on the gravel driveway? So you can see that the number of things that are going to have to consider are an enormous number of things. So, and once we've got this scope and this vision, first of all, and then the scope of what we really want to do, we're then going to have to start planning it in detail, aren't we? Because the tasks don't just happen on their own. So if we're gonna have this scope all drawn out, and then basically we're going to have to get an architect, you know, an expert in to actually, so we can visualize what we've said, and this often happens, you know, whether we visualize things on a diagram showing you a house plan, or whether you do a mind map or a SWOT analysis, or whatever it's going to be, a way to visualize what your vision is and what the scope, what you're trying to do is very important. And then, of course, this has to be broken up. Once we've got the plan, then we have to break this up into smaller parts, because after all, it's a very big plan, a very big project. So we break that up into smaller parts. And how do we do that? Well, we have to make goals. What's the very first goal that we should make? Well, obviously, if you've got the scope exactly right, you know exactly what size of house you want. You want it on 3 floors, you want Velux windows, you want big bay windows at the bottom, you want a kitchen, you want a dining room, you want a living room, you want 5 bedrooms, a double garage, you want to have the driveway outside. So, okay, so all the description is fairly accurate and so forth. But then it's going to have to be broken up into goals, isn't it? So the goals are going to be what? Well, the goals are going to have to be smart, aren't they? Like in every other case when we're talking about goals. Here for the house, for example, it's the specific part of the goal is really to ensure that everything, right down to the last detail, is very specific. For example, if you don't mention to the architect, for example, for the house, in the house example, well, we didn't mention whether you wanted a bath or a shower or an Italian shower in the bathroom, so we put baths in all the bathrooms, but they didn't want baths. There are 2 bathrooms in this house, big house, 2 bathrooms, and we didn't put showers in there. We put baths in there because you didn't specify. So you weren't specific, yeah, and you weren't simple enough in your description of things, and you forgot, basically. So the first part is smart, obviously specific, yeah, you have to be specific with the end goals, yeah. Things have to be measured. So yeah, measured, obviously, you know, in a house, it's a very good example, you know. For example, quite simply, measuring the size of things. What size do the rooms have to be, for example? You know, if you say for example, I want the bedrooms to be fairly small, that doesn't really mean anything, is it? Fairly small, okay, if it's 9 meters squared, yeah, we understand, it's a smaller bedroom, yeah. 14 meters squared, average sized. 30 meters squared, a very big bedroom, yeah, more like a flat within the house. So then you have to really be specific in exactly what you're looking to do. So things that are measured, and obviously measured, for the example we have, measured to scale. for the house, so that when the plan translates to reality, the scale is correct, so that we don't end up with things which are too big or too small when we actually start to build it, because then we might have to demolish it, and that'll take a lot of time. So measurement is extremely important. And this house example is very good because in fact, in terms of that, the measurements that have to be taken are they have to be absolutely exact. For example, now, today we no longer measure distances between walls and so forth. When we start to build the walls and so forth, it's measured with lasers, for example. It's got to be precise to a 100th of a millimeter and so forth, so that you don't make any mistakes. So you have to have these correct tools in order to do that. So then, with the SMART goals, we continue. The goals have to be agreed. So another measurement before. The goals have to be agreed. So they have to be agreed and they have to be achievable. So if you say to these people, say to the builder and the architect who's in charge of the building company, and the building company is working with the architect, and you say to them, for example, I want this five-story house and this 1,400 meters squared garden. I want it to be done within 3 months. Okay, I don't think that's going to be possible, is it? Really? I mean, it's really just not possible because unless all these companies are only working on your house and no one else's house. Okay, but that's probably not going to happen. Okay, so that wouldn't be a reasonable, or what we would call an achievable goal when we're using the SMART system. So we've already said it's got to be specific, so all of the scope and everything's got to be very, very detailed. Got to have very, very detailed measurement, and it's got to be achievable. So maybe if you said, let's give this, for this house, it's going to be a year. Or it's a year and a half. So that it's actually achievable what you're doing. But it doesn't have to just be in terms of time. It can also be, for example, in terms of whether it's, for example, if you tell them that you want, to put 100 trees in the garden. Well, you're not going to put 100 trees in 1,400 meters squared. It's just not going to happen. Okay, because once these trees get a bit bigger, you'll have no land left to look at. And your house foundations will be ruined by too many roots from the trees. So that's just not achievable. Okay, so that wouldn't be something that would be achievable. To build a swimming pool, an Olympic swimming pool in the garden as well, that's not going to be achievable either. Right? For lots of technical reasons, it won't be achievable. In any case, it's really not something you'd want to do in any case. So achievable has got to be, in terms of goals, when you've got a task, when you get any task to someone, if the person can't see it's achievable, then they're going to be, before they even start, they're going to be demotivated before they even start to try and do it. So remember that, and always make sure it's achievable. But also make sure it's agreed, because you might think in your head, yes, this is achievable, this is easy, and so forth, and you just tell the person, this is your goal, and you don't discuss the goal with the person. So in fact, you end up in a situation where you've given something you think is achievable, and in fact the person hasn't got adequate training or adequate experience or adequate expertise to actually be able to do and to attain this goal. So you've done something which would be achievable for you, but not for the person you're giving the goal to. So that's got to be agreed, and make sure there is agreement on the goal, and that the person or the team concerned has adequate experience and adequate tools actually to do the job. So that's also part of agreed. There's another thing about goals which is really, really important, which is also part of the A from SMART, which is never discussed, which is you can make them ambitious. Well, why is that? We've just said, agreed, achievable, but not too easy. Imagine you're talking to a high achiever in your team, and you're saying, we just do the same thing as last year, and really, the production, you don't have to put it up very much, put it by 0.5% on what we did last year, and that should be fine. Sure. When in fact the guy in front of you or the lady in front of you is telling you, well, we could easily do 5% more. No, 0.5% is fine. So they're going to be probably demotivated because you've not given them a goal which is challenging at all. So they're going to become bored. And when people become bored, unfortunately, they do tend to leave the organization, which is not what you're trying to achieve with giving goals to people. So we've said so far for the SMART part of the goals and within the task element of the 3 elements we're going to discuss. We've already talked about specific, yeah. So specific in terms of scope, yeah. It's very important. So that you've got to have the exact scope of the goal. We've talked about measurable in the example we've given. It's easy to see, but that applies to any type of example. You have to be able to measure things. For example, if you give someone a goal related to quality, what's that going to be based on? Is it going to be based on the number of customer feedbacks that you get, or the percentage of positive feedback you get from your customers, or is it going to be based on some customer relationship management system and the results coming from that? Is that going to be based on that? But it has to be measurable, yeah, so that it's fair, yeah, so that the person can see what they're aiming at for a start. Yeah. Then in terms of the AA, we've already said it's got to be achievable. It's got to be something that's achievable. It's got to be something that's agreed, and it should also be ambitious, so that people don't become bored. Then we get to the R, and the R is really simple in terms of being relevant. Yeah. So basically, being relevant, you're not going to ask the general manager of a restaurant to go into the kitchen and cook. Yeah, that's not his job. Okay, and the results may be fairly nasty and actually probably inedible completely. So really, it's got to be relevant to what the person's expertise is. So if you ask the chef in a restaurant, for example, yeah, you have to be more careful on the food costs. We want you to be more careful with the ordering, your market list, and so forth. Yeah, that's fine. If you ask a joiner, yeah, I'd like you to use a certain type of wood when you're building the frame for this roof, and I want the roof done in a certain way with a 45-degree incline, and this is how I want the roof built. That's fine, yeah. Then you go and ask someone. You go and ask the plumber. You say, "Yeah, I'd like you to do all the wiring, the electric wiring for the house, and put in the fuse box, please." Well, really, that's not relevant at all. So the first two are very relevant. The third one's completely irrelevant. I mean, you're not going to ask a plumber to do the wiring in a house. For one thing, he's not going to be qualified to do it. He's not going to have the expertise, not either or the tools to do it. And third, and most important, it's going to actually be quite dangerous, probably for him, and certainly for the house. Yeah, with the electrical wiring gets wrong and the house goes on fire. So that's not a very good idea. This is why relevance is extremely important. But it's not. It doesn't have to be an extreme example like I just gave you. Relevance is also to do with the fact that when you ask someone to do something, do anything, any kind of goal, any kind of something that's got to have a result, it's got to be measured, then at the end of the day, you have to ensure that they have the possibility to actually do it, yeah, so that it's relevant to their job, relevant to the organization, relevant to the company, but especially relevant to the individual, because if that individual can't do this job, then it's going to be a serious problem, yeah, and really it's just not going to be possible. So, and then of course, SMART, at the end of SMART we have, as we all know, time. So time, yeah, so the time, there's two things in time. So we already talked about the first element of time, which we talked about how long is it going to take to build a house, and we said, well, maybe 3 months is really much too short, yeah, but let's say we decided on 18 months. Okay, but time isn't just about the time given for each task. It's about the timing of each task as well. So the time element in objectives is extremely important. So even though someone knows they've got a time to complete the whole project, yeah, you're going to have milestones in there to ensure that we're on time. Yeah. Now the house analogy again is a great one, because at the end of the day, there are several things that have to go into this house, aren't there? Before you even start, yeah, you're going to have to make sure the land is flat, okay? Before you even start to dig the foundations, then you're going to make sure that the foundations are flat, okay? And they're not lopsided, okay? You don't want a house that's on an angle like this. You want a flat house, yeah? So, and you want the house to be built on foundations which are big enough and deep enough to support the weight of the house without moving, yeah? Which is very important also. So that's the very first thing you're going to have to start doing, and then you're going to have to start building the walls, and then you're going to have to look at all the windows, and so if you get the timing, so the timing might be fine. Originally you say it's 18 months, fine. Okay, good. But the timing is also important. If you're meant to be finished, because the architect's going to have to plan with his team, yeah, the team of builders, he's going to have to plan exactly when each person has to arrive and when each person has to do their work. So if you get the painter in, let's say week number, I don't know, it could be week number 30 or 40. Let's get the painter in. Well, it's too early. We haven't finished putting the plaster on the boards and the walls yet. So how are we going to possibly, or the joints? So this painter can't start work, but he's there. So it's been badly timed. So then when we do need him, yeah, and let's say that's going to be at the end of the year and it's week 52. Okay, he's got to start his work at least. He's not available. Well, that would be a bit of a lack of planning. Let's take another example. Yeah, you've started to fit the bathroom out, and the tiler's been in there and he's tiled the whole bathroom, except what they've forgotten is that the piping, hasn't been done yet. So none of the plumbing's connected up. So you have to break all the tiles you just put on to refix the plumbing, and then he has to redo the whole of the all of the tiling. It has to be redone again. A question of timing once again. So things have to be done in a certain order and planned in a certain order, but that plan has to be stuck to, yeah? Because if you don't stick to the plan, then you're going to have confusion, like I just told you about with the house, yeah? But that can happen whether it's a house or whether it's another example of a big goal. Doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, you have to break things into smaller pieces so this goal can be achieved. The goal of building this house, in this case, in this 1.5 year period. So, of course, this means that you have to break the goal into objectives and into SMART objectives, as we already discussed. But you have to ensure that everything's aligned so that everyone starts their work and continues their work at the same time when they should, and that they can actually follow each other's work and do it at the correct time, yeah? You can't build the walls and forget to put the electricity in, for example. If you've got ventilation and air conditioning, you have to do that before you put the ceiling in, yeah? Because if you put the ceiling and you haven't put the ventilation yet, well, then you're going to have to break the ceiling and do it again. So there's so many examples, very simple examples. I'd like you to keep these in your mind, because this analogy of the house is a very good analogy. It's when you're planning anything, yeah, make sure things happen in the correct order. Okay, that's very important in terms of time. So the message here is that the time from SMART isn't just about the time, the total time to achieve an objective. It's also about timing, so that you ensure you can get to the objective. I think I've made the point as best I can for the moment. So you've got the scope, you've got the vision, you've got all these SMART goals and objectives that have been planned. Everything's planned out properly. The timing's been planned properly. You have a project manager that's experienced, he knows what he's doing, and so forth. So what else do we need in the tasks part of things? Well, what do you need to complete a job well? You obviously need the correct tools. Let's take a very simple example. Yeah, let's say that none of the joiners on the building site, none of them have nail guns. The guys that are trying to build the foundations don't have any spades to put the concrete into the foundations when they start. Yeah, they're trying to do it with their hands. That's not going to be very useful, is it? It's going to be very difficult. So and a joiner he's got no nail guns, so he's going to be when he's trying to build the roof frame, that's going to be a real disaster. That's going to take him a hell of a long time with just a hammer. Yeah. So tools, yeah, they have to have the correct tools. Now, this is on a building site we're talking about for a house, because we're staying on this example. But you imagine in any situation where you don't give people the correct tools. You ask someone, I don't know, to clean a certain area, the cleaning company, you say, okay, so let's go and clean this 2,000 square meter conferencing room, let's do that, or whatever they're doing, or office space, or whatever it is. And then you discover, yeah, it's great. So then your cleaning supervisor comes and tells you, sorry, but we don't have any vacuum cleaners. Well, what do you mean you don't have any vacuum? Well, none that are working. Oh dear. So that's going to hold things up a bit, isn't it? If you don't have the correct tools, or tools that are working, Yeah. Now this happens so often. Yeah. It doesn't matter whether it's in a building administrative situation where people are having to use computers and software and so forth. Even then, I mean, if it's very frustrating, and I think a lot of you probably know this, but if that software is not working, yeah, or your computer is too slow, or your printer is not connected properly and you can't get your work printed, this can become very frustrating very fast. Yeah, and I know what I'm talking about here as I write books. So if something happens with my software, when I'm trying to write, it's obviously a big problem. And I think this happens far too often. Yeah, so there has to be responsibility, and the responsibility is whose? The leader's responsibility, the manager's responsibility to ensure that people are furnished with not only the correct tools, but also tools which function correctly. That's very important. They have to have the right tools all of the time. So that's very important too. And so you've given everyone the right tools. Let's imagine that you've got the scope, they've got the vision, they've got the goals, the SMART goals, they've got the tools, and then you discover that yes, fantastic, except half the builders haven't been trained properly, so they don't know how to do their job because the architect couldn't find all the people in time, and so the people that are on the job aren't trained to do it. Well, the results there could be quite horrific, couldn't they? And we're not talking just about building a house. If you build a house, it's easy to see that if the plumber's not properly trained and the house, as soon as it's built and you move in and it starts springing leaks everywhere, it's not going to be very comfortable. Or if the electricity has been put in incorrectly because the guy wasn't experienced and knows his job well enough, that could cause a fire quite easily. So, it's actually dangerous. And this can happen. You can transfer this example to so many other examples where people don't receive training or the correct training in order to do their job. Now, this includes, of course, managers, which is one thing that we often forget. We often forget that the actual tool, the real tool that a manager requires is actually training so they can do their job. So they have to be trained, for example, in how to do a performance review and how to check on how the guys are getting on in the team, how to carry out a one-to-one meeting. All of these things, they take time, but they take training. So, and the necessary tools for a manager often are to do with training. So, for time management, for example, if a manager or leader can't manage their own time, there's not much chance that they're going to be managing anyone else's time correctly. So the very first thing they have to be able to do is be organized themselves and actually able to organize other people's work, but first and foremost their own. Okay, so they have to be trained, and then of course we can get into situations where we have complex equipment. We've got a task to do. Okay, let's say we have a task this time to do with the house again. We can come back to the house. I say the task is to do a 3D mock-up of the house before we even start. Okay, so yeah, fine. Okay, except we haven't trained the assistant architect on this particular software, so that when he does the 3D mock-up, it looks nothing like what was envisaged in the first place, and we have to scrap the project and start again. Yeah, because you didn't receive adequate training on that software. But it can be so many things, can't it? I mean, you ask someone, can you imagine, you ask someone, you do the budget for the entire year for a massive organization with 1,000 people working for them. You say, please do the budget, and I want to see that for the next couple of weeks. And they come back after a couple of weeks and actually, I really do need to require more training on Excel to manage it. Oh dear. You seem to check that. Yeah, I mean that's terrible. Especially if someone that's asked to do a budget and they've not even been trained on Excel. Can you imagine that? That'd be quite very, very difficult for everyone involved. So people have to have the correct training to do things. And in a customer-facing environment, it's also it doesn't have to be in production. Production obviously is important. Yeah? If you're not trained to use the machine that you're using to produce goods properly, there are going to be mistakes. Production is going to be slow. Quality might be bad at the end of the production line because people haven't been trained properly. So there's so many problems if we don't train. But also, as I just said, in customer-facing environments, if you don't train people how to, basically how to talk to people, how to welcome people to your retail outlet or wherever it is, it's not you're not going to have a competitive advantage compared to others. who've got fantastic staff that know exactly what they're doing. They're always smiling, and your staff are all miserable and crying nearly because they've not been trained properly and they don't have the correct tools. So that's not going to have a good outcome either, is it? So basically, yeah, really, I mean, you've got to ensure that once you've got your scope, vision, goals, everything sorted out, you've got smart objectives, you've got the tools, but make sure you've got the training that goes with it, yeah? Because if you don't give them the training for those tools, at one point, you're just not going to have any autonomy, yeah? And you're going to spend your time as a manager or a leader constantly intervening where you shouldn't have to, yeah? So it's going to be a big waste of time, and you're not going to be able to plan your time or your people's time. So this is first and foremost, we've already talked about the task. But then we have to talk about the team, yeah? So for a team to achieve things and to achieve tasks, one of the very more important things is that they've got to be motivated. And as we've said, I mentioned earlier, they've got to be have goals which are aligned, yeah? So what do I mean by that? Well, when you have a team, there's often this acronym which everyone uses, which is together everyone achieves more. And how true is that? I mean, you take this house example or analogy again. I mean, imagine if you didn't have any plumbers or electricians, yeah, but it'd be fine. You kind of live in a house where you can't wash yourself or heat yourself, yeah, that's fine. Okay, it's not going to last very long, is it? So you need everyone on board to achieve the end result. So I actually prefer another saying which I prefer, which is really it's an African proverb, which is to go fast, to go alone, to go far, go together. Yeah, which comes to the same thing at the end of the day. But I actually prefer that one because it's so true, isn't it? Yeah? If you want to get something done properly, you have to have the right people involved in the team, and each person in that team has to understand what their exact role is in the team. So you know, if you've given someone autonomy to be the team leader, they have to understand how to do this. Okay, so this goes back to training as a manager, or a leader, or a supervisor. You have to understand how to do that, and every person in that team may have their own goals, own individual goals. But what's important, there must be cohesion within the team, and there must be goals which are similar and, in fact, which are for all of the team. For example, overall quality. So you've got everyone in your team. Let's go back to the building team. It doesn't really matter what kind of team we're talking about, but if we go back to the building team, they all have to understand that the objective is to produce the highest quality possible. So each one of them has to produce that quality in their own field, yeah? Because the overall result is going to be judged on how they've worked together and what they've produced together, yeah, not what they've produced separately, because at the end of the day, it's a house we're talking about, so it has to be really the work of everyone has to complete the goal, and it has to be a quality goal. So team, together everyone achieves more, yeah, very important. And the other thing about the team is they have to understand, there have to be markers for the team, don't there? There have to be markers where you meet the teams from time to time to discuss progress. We mentioned it earlier in the task part of this discussion to say that yes, indeed, there have to be markers to know where we are, you know, so the timing, not just the time, but the timing. So where are we with the project? And in order to discover that, we're going to have meetings, and in a case like that, in a project like that, you're going to have weekly meetings or monthly meetings at least, where everyone has to sit down and things have to be discussed. Now, when you're doing meetings, they have to be organised. I mean, it might seem very obvious, yeah, but I've been in so many meetings where people arrive and we don't know what we're going to talk about. So there are a few very, very simple rules about meetings which have to be adhered to if you want the team to perform properly. One of these rules, one of the very first rules, is to ensure there's an agenda for the meeting so that everyone knows before they get to the meeting what is going to be discussed. So for example, let's take the house example once again. Okay, this week we need to discuss, you know, when the plaquist is going to be finished building all the boards on the walls. When they're going to be sealed correctly, so that we know when the painting can begin and when the painting should actually start. Yeah, okay, that's very clear on the agenda. Yeah, but we're not going to discuss Okay, tiling during this meeting, okay, because we don't have to discuss that yet. Okay, tiling for the bathroom, for example. So a clear agenda for everyone. Okay, so at this meeting, let's say we're going to discuss the quality of operations, and we're going to the quality of customer service, or the quality of follow-up with issues. Sales, after sales service, for example, for a product. We're going to discuss that this week. Or we're going to discuss the employee satisfaction or customer satisfaction. Or this week we're going to concentrate more on the financial aspect of the project. Of course, we didn't even mention that, but financially you do need money to build a house. But for any business you need money. But as long as people know in advance what they've got to be talking about during that meeting, this is already a good step forward. The second thing is to ensure that you invite the right people to the meeting, because as I said earlier, in the example that I used, if you're going to be talking about the painting and finishing off the walls and so forth, you might need the mason, you might need the carpenter, and you might need the painter, but you certainly don't need the plumber to be there if that's what you're talking about, or the guy who's building the roof. Okay, so make sure the correct people are at the meeting. Don't waste people's time when it's unnecessary. Make sure that it's clear what the agenda is, that the correct people are at the meeting in question, and that they know how they're involved in this meeting. Another thing to do is make sure you take minutes. Now, how often have I been to meetings and when I asked, are there any minutes? No, there are no minutes. This was informal. Oh, was it? Okay, you were talking about the budget. Well, that shouldn't really be informal, should it? I mean, there should be some kind of minutes taken if you're in a budget meeting to discuss, for example, decisions that have been made. How much did we decide to spend on capital investment this year, for example? How much did we decide we need to make in terms of profit? Have we got targets for the spending on basically on equipment, on computer equipment this year? Is there a budget for that? I mean, a budget is a very complex process, and when you have a meeting about the budget, you really do need to have minutes to tell you what's been decided, and also to avoid something very, very obvious. And what would that be? Well, that would be to avoid making the mistake of discussing the thing you've already discussed and discussing it again, and then again, and then again, because we've forgotten where we were with the subject. Okay, so that's just not acceptable, is it, right? You really need to ensure that everyone knows where they're going. So the minutes are very useful. And when you construct your meetings, basically, if you've got the same people there again, you should go over the minutes from the last meeting, first of all. Then you should discuss the things that are on the agenda, including things that people have put forward for the agenda. That's very important. You mustn't just impose all the time everything that's going to be talked about. You have to give space for the people involved to put ideas forward for what should be included in the meeting too. And that's very important. So, and then you've got to ensure, once you've got all your meetings organized correctly and so forth, that there's alignment. Well, what do I mean by alignment? That the goals that people have as individuals in the team are not pulling people in opposite directions. Let me give you an example of that. For example, you've told someone on the production line, let's say it's a production line, building cars, and you've said, yes, well, production, let's say productivity has to go up. We're not changing the equipment on the operating line, however, we have to increase productivity, so there are going to have to be more people are going to have to get faster, there's going to have to retraining and so forth. And at the same time, you're telling the quality needs to be better. And you've told each of these people separately. So quality control has to be stricter and productivity has to go up. Okay, but the productivity engineer and the quality engineer, you've told them this separately. But you haven't given them a joint goal to say that quality and productivity need to work together to ensure that we have better quality and productivity on the production line. Okay, which would be much easier, wouldn't it? Right. So we'll give them a common goal. Because if you don't, there's not going to be proper alignment, and you're probably going to end up in arguments, just futile arguments, where people basically are saying, well, yes, but you told me the quality has to be perfect. So they're refusing cars which are concerning which before would have been accepted really easily, and then now they're not being accepted because of there's a tiny scratch near the back wheel, or something. I don't know how that works, to be honest with you. I'm not from production line business, but you can imagine the impact in any case. Yeah. It's also, well, I'll give you another example just to make it very clear. You've told someone, I want the occupancy in a hotel to be as high as possible, and you tell the sales manager that. And then you tell the revenue manager, I want the average rate for the room to be as high as possible this year. Okay, fine. So they're both working on completely opposite ends of the spectrum, yeah? Because then you've just asked, what basically you've asked the person in charge of sales to just make sure they fill the hotel all the time. You didn't talk about the price to them. And you've told the revenue manager you want the highest average rate per room sold the whole year. Yeah? So they're obviously not going to be getting on very well, because every time the sales manager says, we've got this huge amount of business and we're going to stick all these rooms in there and we're going to do them at 50 euros a night for everyone. And the revenue manager is saying that's not possible. Actually, we were looking at average room rates of 150. Well, they're obviously not going to agree. Yeah, but if you give them, if you give them a goal, which is called RevPAR, which is revenue per available room, yeah, which is basically the occupancy multiplied by the average rate, yeah, that will then be a goal which both will be able to aim at, yeah. And what you're going to find there is they're going to be helping each other to attain that goal instead of shooting in kind of commas at each other all the time. Yeah. Okay. So it's very important to ensure you have cohesion in the team. And one of the worst things you can do is give goals which are diametrically opposed to people in the team, and you have to explain what the global goals and the global mission of the team are at the outset of working with a team. And you also have to ensure that people, there will be different personalities and so forth in the team, and it's your job to ensure that everyone can work together. Yeah, I mean, people don't have to get married in the team, but they do have to be able to get on so that they can actually achieve the job. So that's very important. So basically, ensure that your people are working towards the same ends. Yeah. There's images, there's lots of images of this when we talk about teamwork, isn't there? It's like when you see a rowing boat and everyone's rowing in the right direction, in the same direction, and you have half of the people that start rowing in the opposite direction, the boat stops. Yeah. So it's the same thing with the team. There has to be direction. That's what leaders and managers are there for. You to set the direction, set the tone, ensure that everyone understands what everyone else is doing in the team, and they don't have to really like the other people, but they have to respect the expertise of the others in the team, so that work can be done, okay, and we can get the job done. So we talked about the task, we've talked about the importance of the team that has to get the task done together, and then of course what we mustn't forget, and we must never forget this, is the power of the individual within the team. Now there's a few great sayings about this. Yeah, I mean, earlier on we were talking about the task, for example, and I talked about the importance of tools and training. We could have used Richard Branson's famous phrase, famous quote, where he said, train your people well enough so that they can leave, and then treat them well enough so they don't want to, which is obviously a good thing, isn't it? I mean, obviously, it's obvious. So I'll repeat it once again, because I think it's such a good quote, particularly in terms of what we're talking about with the training and the importance of the training and the tools. So train your people well enough so that they can leave, and then treat them well enough so they don't want to. And then when we come to individuals, there's a quote by Simon Sinek, which I think says a lot to a lot of people, and it's a great quote from Simon Sinek. Basically, he says, leadership is not about being in charge. Leadership is about taking care of those in your charge. Now that's a very good lead into the third part of our discussion, which is about individuals, because after all, everyone is their own person, everyone has different dreams, everyone has different objectives, both personal and work related objectives. Everyone has different ways of seeing things, different ways of perceiving things, different ways of thinking about things. Yeah, some people are more creative, some people are more organized, some people are better on an emotional level, some people are better with emotional intelligence, some people are better at being analytical. So you've got lots of different, and these, it doesn't mean that someone that's analytical can't be creative, for example. Of course they can. It's just that their preference is to be analytical. Yeah. Like someone's preference, someone's highly creative, yeah, it's probably their preference is to work in a creative way or in a creative environment, yeah. So that's normal. One's not better than the other. So whether you're well organized, whether you're analytical, whether you're more on the soft side of the soft skills, on the emotional level, in management and leadership, which is very important, obviously, or whether you're more really an analyst or highly organized, which you do have to be too, as I talked about that earlier. These are all qualities from individuals. And all of these individuals will have their own preferences and their own preferred way to work. Yeah. So one of your jobs as a manager is to find out how you're going to function with each person in your team. Now, as a leader or a manager, whichever the project is, whether it's the house project we've been discussing during today, whether it's another project entirely, what's going to be very important is that the people that you're working with have purpose, believe in what they're doing, that they want to attain their personal objectives, they want to be part of the organization, they want to be there with the rest of the team. They come to work every day feeling inspired, feeling incited, feeling excited to come to work, and not coming to work with a sore stomach because the toxic boss is waiting to give them scroush out and scream at them and give them orders. So people, you have to treat them well. You have to take care of your people. Now, care, if you're talking about a customer-facing environment, would mean that normally customers aren't really everything. Well, let me tell you, from my experience, the customers that are most important to you as a manager and a leader are your employees. They are your customers. Not the final customers. The customers that you should be concerned about the most are your employees. Because if your employees and your teams don't adhere to the vision of the company, the mission of the company, if they don't believe in what they're doing and they don't have purpose in the workplace and trust, they're not going to do a good job. Yeah. Now, how do we build trust and build relationships with people? Well, it's very simple. We build trust and relationships like we do in life with people, one to one, and one conversation at a time. And there are a few things that we all have to remember about having conversations with other people. We have to remember it's not just good enough to give your word, yeah. Because when you give your word to someone, all that you're creating is hope, yeah. That's fine to create hope, but when you keep your word, yeah, you're creating trust, and that's so much more important, yeah. And then you're really building relationships. So the very first thing to say is that I believe, and I really thoroughly believe this, and I've written a book about this, yeah, about these one-to-one relationships in the workplace, and it's called One-to-One. So it's building quality relationships for engagement and success. Yeah. So it's very easy to understand that if you don't spend that quality time with people for engagement and success, as I've just said. So I'll repeat the name of the book again. It's One-to-One. In fact, I'm going to show you the book. There we are. So, managing quality time with individuals for engagement and success. One-to-one. So here it is. Yeah. One-to-one, managing quality time with individuals for engagement and success. Now, I would highly recommend this book to anyone. It's doing quite well, actually. And it's been very helpful for a lot of people in a lot of situations, because I go into a lot of detail about how it is to carry out these meetings, why it's so important, and exactly how to go about it. Yeah. So once again, one-to-one, managing quality time with individuals for engagement and success. So what is engagement and success? Well, obviously success is success, right? But to engage properly, you have to build these relationships that I talked about. Now, it's not you don't stand for 5 minutes at the coffee machine talking to people about their life and how's your wife and how are the kids, and that's fine. Yeah, of course. I mean, there's no problem with that, and it's actually a good thing. Obviously, you have to be social. People are social. I mean, human beings are social animals. So we do have to take time to actually talk to people. It's part of recognizing who they are, not just what they do, but who they are. So that's important, but it's not sufficient. If you want things to really work well in an organization for you, and we go to this individual part of things, we have to spend quality time, which is what we just talked about 3 times. I was insisting about my book. So the quality time. But that quality time has to be formal time. So basically it's got to be planned. It's got to be time where you've said, okay, for the closest members in your team, you're taking them apart and you're saying, not taking them apart, I mean you're seeing them individually and in the correct conditions, which means that you're going to discuss. First and foremost, you're going to discuss their objectives. What are their objectives for the year? How are they getting on with their objectives? Remember, I mentioned earlier time, SMART objectives. It's not just about the overall time for an objective. It's also about having markers and making sure we are in time. So if we don't have these markers, we'll never be able to ensure we are in time. So I reckon, and I really do highly recommend that you have these meetings with people at least once a month. So meetings once a month with people, formal meetings where they can come to the meeting with their ideas and things they want to put in the agenda. But there will be things on the agenda which are already fixed. For example, every single time that you see someone, you will be talking about their objectives. If you're seeing someone once a month in your closest team, you're going to be talking about the objectives. And why will you be talking about the objectives? Well, because perhaps there was something in the external environment will have come and interfered. There's been a downturn in demand, for example, for your product or your service, and so the production, let's say, the production objectives are no longer valid at all. They're obsolete. So you have to sit down and relook at the objective and so forth. Or it could be something to do with a person needs more resources, either in terms of financial resources, maybe in terms of human resources, to actually get the job done that they've been asked to do. So that's another thing you'd be discussing towards their objectives. So that's very important. After all, you don't want to get to the end of the year in a performance appraisal and say to someone, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry, you haven't succeeded in any of your objectives." Well, why is that? Well, because we didn't talk about it for the whole year. Well, no, that's really not a good way to do things, and you really need to have these formal meetings with people, from time to time. To ensure that they're going to get the most out of these meetings. The other thing that you have to do during these meetings is, as a manager and leader, you are not going to be doing what I'm doing just now, which is talking all of the time. You are going to be listening, and we're going to use the Pareto rule here. You're going to be listening at least 80% of the time. Now that might sound like a huge amount. Well, maybe in your first one-to-ones when someone's not used to speaking so much in this type of meeting, you're maybe going to have to incite them a little bit more, ask more questions and so forth. But your role really is, it really should be their meeting. It's not your meeting. It's important for you, this meeting, but it's not your meeting. It's their meeting. It's their privileged time. It's when they get to expose what's going on in their department, their operation, and where they get to talk to you about the problems they may be having. It's also a place where it should be a very, very secure space in terms of trust. And why is that so important? Well, apart from the objectives you'll be discussing with the person, there's also other things that you can discuss. I mean, what if someone says to you in one of these one-to-one meetings, "Well, I've got a terribly serious personal problem. I'd like to speak to you about it." And you say, no, it's nothing to do with work, so I really don't want to hear it. That'd be a dreadful mistake. I mean, there you're really basically cutting the relationship, completely. It doesn't mean, as a manager or leader, that you're going to be able to solve everyone's personal issues. Of course not. But what you do have to do, you have to at least, the very least, is to show proper empathy and respect for the person and actually listen. And won't be tied, perhaps, You may even have the start of a solution, or at least be able to indicate where they can get help for the particular problem that they mentioned to you. And that would already be helpful. But what's more helpful is just to really is to be an attentive listener on that stage and really listen to what they're saying to you. Okay, and don't start saying, yeah, that's fine. So let's get back to talking about the productivity on the production line. No, don't do that. Yeah, listen to the person. Okay, that time spent listening and showing proper empathy and respect for the person is not time wasted. You're still building a relationship with that person, and it's really important to do so. Yeah. Coming back to the famous Simon Sinek thing, leadership's not about being in charge, it's about taking care of the people in your charge. And I really do believe that. So, once you've got coming back to the three areas, sorry, but just a couple more things about the one-to-one meetings. Obviously, during these one-to-one meetings, as in team meetings, my advice is always to switch your phone off, put it in the drawer. You should never be getting your phone out to answer an SMS or hold on a second, I've just got an important email from the boss. No. It's a privileged moment in time. You have to ensure that person knows it's a privileged moment and that it's just you and them. It's one-on-one, 1-to-1. Yeah, it's very important. If you start to send SMSs, oh, hi boss, I'm sorry, just give me a sec, wait outside, I'll come back to you in a minute. No, if you do that, you're ruining the relationship. You're showing the person, in fact, when you do that, you're not important. So that's actually the worst thing to do. Other things to ensure in a one-to-one meeting is basically to ensure that you're basically, we've said it's quality time. So the quality of the time depends on lots of different things. No interruptions, for example. So you tell your assistant, I haven't to be interrupted during this meeting at all, unless, of course, the building's on fire. Yeah, okay. Certain exceptions, but they have to be terribly important. Yeah. So no interruptions, no phones. It's just you and that person. There is, of course, as we said for the team meetings as well, there have to be some minutes for this meeting. So the minutes from the last meeting would be the first thing you would discuss, what you discussed the last time, the last month. Then go on a point over the objectives that they've had. Then you can talk about what's happening in operations today, how are the team doing, any problems for the individual members of the team, are there any training needs for the team? So you can go into all the HR aspects. So you've talked about objectives, operational objectives, the HR aspects. I've actually got a good, something that's worked for me in any case in the past has been something that I call SCOP, which is sales, costs, operations and people. And basically it's always to do with, you talk about the sales, you talk about the costs, you talk about the operations, you talk about the people. So you're covering basically operations and all the HR aspects, And then, of course, there is time to talk about the individual themselves, I mean, they're obviously, they might have development plans as well, and succession planning might be going on. So, that gives you time also to go through what they're aspiring to. Have they got training going on for themselves? How's their training going? And don't forget, right at the start of these one-to-one meetings, you don't have to start straight into, let's talk about your productivity objectives, your objectives in terms of the employee satisfaction survey and the customer satisfaction survey, and we're then going to discuss operating efficiency, and we're then going to discuss the budget, and we're then going to discuss, maybe at the start, how are you? Please have a seat. Would you like something to drink? Ensure the temperature of the room's okay. We all know that if you're in a room that's like at 40 degrees, you're falling asleep. You're not concentrating on anything. So you have to the environmental conditions even have to be correct. But this goes for team meetings and individual meetings, by the way. You also have to ensure. What else do you have to ensure? Well, you have to ensure, for example, there's not a meeting next door and everyone's shouting and screaming in a meeting next door. You have to make sure there's no noise. Or that there's not a building site next to you and someone's drilling a hole in the ground while you're trying to speak. It's not going to go very well. So it has to be quiet enough. The conditions have to be good. Always make sure you give someone something to drink during it. I don't mean alcohol, obviously. I'm talking about water or coffee or tea. And why is that so important? Well, it's not just because it's polite, because it is polite, of course. show some respect. You ask someone to have a seat. Would you listen to something to drink before we start? How's everything? Is everything at home fine? Blah blah blah. You can ask these informal questions at the start. And if you don't give someone something to drink, and you're in an office for half an hour, an hour and a half, for example, doing a one-to-one, and you've not offered anything to drink, the person's going to be thirsty. Yeah? And if someone gets too thirsty or too dehydrated, you can't focus properly. It's just a simple fact of life. It's the same thing as trying to do a one-to-one during a meal. That's also a fantastically bad idea. It's a good idea, perhaps, to take one of your close team members with you to go for a meal. Yeah, but it's certainly going to be more of an informal event where you're going to you might discuss work, but it's certainly not going to be something that's written down on let's say the minutes. There's not going to be any minutes of this meeting. Yeah. The other thing is that it's always terrible at these meetings if you try and do them one-to-one. Is basically when you're trying to manage this quality time, and as we said for engagement and success. I don't know how you can do that if the person's mouth full and your mouth's full and you can't speak. Yeah? Or the person's going to end up thinking they have to speak all the time and they're not going to eat anything. Yeah, so no, it's a useless exercise. Which is also a point. It brings me to another point. Another useless exercise in a one-to-one is to do your one-to-one just after lunch. That's not a good idea. You're doing your thing just after lunch. What you're going to find. Hold on, I'm just going to close this window. There's a bit of noise. Better. So, when you're doing your one-to-one, as we said, noise. It's not a good idea. Yeah, and what else is not a good idea? Well, having it straight after lunch, yeah, because we all know that straight after lunch, your blood sugar level goes up, you're trying to digest your meal, and you're falling asleep. Yeah? Other great times to avoid, is basically, let's say you're running a retail outlet, yeah, and it's Saturday afternoon, and you decide to do your one-to-ones with all your supervisors on a Saturday afternoon, when you've got like 1 billion customers in your store. No, that's really not a good idea either. So timing is important, yeah. You're running you're in a hospital, yeah, and you decide on a Saturday night in the accident and emergency, we're going to have meetings then. No. I think it's probably the busiest time of the whole week, so you're not going to do it then and there, are you? So planning a time. Another more simple examples is someone, on a Friday afternoon, yeah. I mean, you've called in a guy or a lady to speak to her about a one-to-one. And go through a lot of objections on Friday evening at 5 o'clock. Yeah. So what do you think they're thinking about? Well, they're thinking about the weekend, yeah. And they're not really concentrating on what you're talking about. Yeah, they're just thinking about getting home for the weekend. Yeah. Okay. So there are certain times during the day or during the week when it's really not a good time to have one-to-one. But these should be fairly obvious. But if they're not obvious to you. As I said to you, my book exists, and once again, I'll tell you the name of my book. It's One-to-One, Managing Quality Time with Individuals for Engagement and Success. So that can be found. My name's Robertson Hunter Stewart. It's very easy to find on Amazon, this book. So, coming back to our main frame subject, so when I talk about the main frame, it's the task, the team, and the individual. I think you can see how all these things are highly related to one another. The three things have to be present in order for you to succeed any task or to succeed in any organizational vision. You have to know how to deal with tasks, build tasks. You have to know about the scope, the vision, the goals, how to make the goals and the objectives smart, to ensure that the tools and the training are there for your people. They have to be there. For your people. When we talk about the team, we have to make sure that everyone's going in the same direction. There have to be overall objectives that apply to the whole team. Yeah, you have to ensure that the team dynamics, that people know how to work together, how to respect each other's expertise. You have to know how to hold meetings with people, and that the right people should be at those meetings. Well, that's what we also talked about during the teams. And in one-to-one meetings, you have to treat individuals as individuals. Because I think one thing you've got to understand, and I won't go into the one-to-one meetings again, I think we spent enough time on that, but you do have to understand that people in general, you and I, we don't work for organizations, we don't work for companies, we work for other people. Yeah. So as a manager and a leader, if you show true care for your people through through care and competence. Competence when you're running a meeting, knowing how to run a meeting correctly, whether it's a team meeting, whether it's a one-to-one meeting, ensuring that your people do have the tools and the training so that you can empower them, so that there's a relationship based on mutual confidence and trust that installs itself. I think if you're thinking things in terms of task, team and individual, and you always try and think in those terms, you're not going to go far wrong in the business decisions or the organizational decisions that you're going to take. And I would suggest to you that this triangle is extremely useful. And it's extremely useful in terms of problem solving. When you sit down, you say, oh my goodness, we got a problem. Okay, so okay, where's the problem coming from? When something's happening constantly and it's a problem, okay, where's it coming from? Is it coming from the task? Is it coming from the individuals? Is it coming from the teams? And by the way, when I say the individuals, I'm also talking about yourself as a manager or a leader. You have to be able to analyze whether or not you've done something, which is also part of being able to analyze yourself and your own performance. Okay, are you giving a bad example, for example, to your people? I hope not. But in any case, this framework will allow you to approach the problem at least, and actually start some kind of mind mapping. And I think we've all heard of mind mapping. There was mind mapping invented by a guy called Tony Buzan. Very useful way to do things. Not the subject today, but I really wanted you to understand this triangle, this triangle for success, as I call it, So the task, the team, and the individual. You always have to think about each aspect of this in order to ensure the organizational success is there. So without any further ado, I'm going to wrap this up for today. So once again, just to repeat for our very last time, the task, the team, and the individual. So the task is the scope, it's the vision, it's the goals. Make sure the goals are smart, get your tools, give them the right tools, and make sure people are trained. And when I say trained, this also means that the managers are trained how to manage people. It's very important. It's often forgotten. Because often we tell experts, an expert gets a promotion, but you're an expert in finance, but you're not an expert in managing people. So you've just been given a team with no training how to run a team. No. You should be accompanied in that by HR giving you correct training. So there's the tools and the training, and then we go to the team part, where the team has to have team goals. Okay, goals which are for all. Okay, so general or global goals for the team. There has to be alignment on those goals, both from a moral standpoint, which means that people are giving the example. So when you say the company culture is this, this, and this, and you're seen not to act in that way, well, that's not going to go well. So that's moral alignment. So it has to be shown that they actually do behave in the manner that's expected. And then alignment in terms of goals is obviously to ensure that you're not, as I gave in the examples, putting goals in place which are diametrically opposed to one another in the same team. Right? That's just not going to work. Okay, they need to work together. You need to give them goals which actually work, and are aligned with the company values and are aligned with the company goals and the mission and the vision. So that's very important for the team. And then, of course, also never to forget that people are individuals and treat them as such. And once again, I won't say the phrase. I think I repeated it twice already. Simon Sinek's famous phrase about caring for people, but I think that you get it, that you have to care for people, and it has to be sincere. So with that said, the triangle for success, I think we've talked about it enough now. So thank you for that, and see you in the very near future for more on management and leadership.